Recording.
All right, so we're gonna call the selectmen's meeting to order here at 5 p.m. First up, we have New Hampshire DOT. We have Mr. Bill Sapien, excuse me, who's here to speak to us today about some Pier Scour mitigation at the bridge down on 175, lower 175. And we have a
Green Bridge.
no, it's not.
Not the green, we're not here for the green bridge.
I'm just gonna let-
What are we doing?
Went down by several miles down your south beach, south of exit 31.
Oh,
All right. I'm thinking, I had a Kahlua before I. She's driving.
But you might want to, because it might be beneficial for you guys to be here. I think you want to be here.
We good to go?
You're good to go.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm here with David Scott. He's the project manager for the project, and I'm the senior project engineer for the project. So if you go to the next slide. So here's our location map, right? So you can see a couple of things noted on the screen there. Exit 31 on exit 93 is just north, about a 3/4 of a mile north of where our bridge is. So if you come off exit 31 and come south, you're going to run over our bridge, which is shown there in the circle.
Oh, I know this stuff.
Next slide, please. So why are we having this? Why are we doing this project? So all bridges are evaluated on a scale of 0 to 9 when we do our condition evaluations, 9 being new, 0 being closed. So when we evaluate this bridge, it's in really good condition. Deck is a 7, which is good. Superstructure, which is the beams and such, are in good shape, but the substructure that which supports the bridge to the ground is in rough shape, and mainly because of scour that we have going on at one of the piers. So that automatically brings the bridge condition evaluation with regards to the substructure down to a poor condition or a rating of 4, and that puts it on the state's red list. And what that means for the state is that it has greater oversight for inspection. We have to inspect it more often, and there's just more awareness of the condition, and it brings a heightened awareness to us to want to fix it so we can get it back off that red list. So that's why we're here. We want to take care of the scour hole that's going on at one of the piers. There's no other bridge work associated with the bridge for this project at this time. Next slide, please. So just a couple of pictures. The upper left is the Google image of the bridge. The right top picture is looking northeast towards the pier. That's our subject pier, which is the southerly pier of the bridge. And the issue is on the upstream, which is to the left side of that pier. And the lower left is just an image from underwater image showing the deep foundation piles, which are essentially stilts that go into the ground and hold the bridge up. That's not supposed to be exposed at all. So we've got about 12 to 14 feet of scour that's continuing to happen. It's not an immediate danger of the bridge right now, but we want to go in there and fix that and bring it back to its basically as constructed condition and take care of that scour hole. Next slide, please. So how are we going to do that? Well, just to orient you in this picture, 175 is running, left to right on the picture. The main channel of the PEMI is on the right-hand side, just upstream of the bridge. The river splits, and there's a branch that comes down, which is the bridge to the south or on the left-hand side of that slide. And then those two branches join back together just downstream of our bridge. So in between those two bridges, we're going to access through the guardrail and build ourselves an access road that brings us down to the river level. And that's shown in the brown there on the screen. And then when we'll build ourselves that causeway or roadway out to the bridge, we'll split around the sides of the pier that we need to get to. And our fix is going to be to install a copper dam, a steel copper dam, which you may see these big sheets of steel that we drive into the ground. And we basically going to put a 4-sided perimeter, which is kind of shown in blue there, around. If you see the real thin slice, what looks like a very thin slice there in that rectangle, that's the pier itself. If you go to the next larger rectangle, kind of shown in white, a lighter black line around it, that's what we call the pile cap or the foundation that holds the pier. And the blue, heavy blue rectangle around that, which goes out about 20 feet on all sides of that pier cap, we're going to put that permanent copper dam in, which is basically sheet pile, and we're going to fill it with stone. We're going to cap it with concrete, and that will give us our permanent protection against that'll be deep enough into the river that the river should not ever be undermining that in the future. So that's how we're gonna do that as our permanent fix. However, we need to kind of create ourselves a dry situation to work in. So the red lines that are shown horizontal and they're pointed to on the top there is temporary cofferdam. So that's more of that sheet pile that we're gonna put in, but that's temporary. And so we'll put that in to help divert the water out of the way while we do our work. And then when we're done, the red portions of the cofferdam will come back out and allow the river to flow as it flows. And the blue perimeter of cofferdam you see in that rectangle will stay there permanently. Next slide, please. So this just zooms in a little bit closer. You can see, that middle slice there, that's the pier. And then the outer blue-ish is that squiggly line that goes around the perimeter. That's the cofferdam that goes in. And then you see the red highlighted cofferdam, that's the temporary. I also show what I've labeled here, the bridge deck that goes over the top. That's we'll be under that doing this work, but I need to, the reason I point that out is because we are going to affect traffic on the bridge for a little bit of time. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what this is showing is primarily our work is underneath, and when we're doing that work, traffic will still be able to get through the work zone. But in the very beginning of the project, and the very end of the project, when we're putting in the cofferdam, we have to do that from the bridge deck. So we're going to have to place a crane on the bridge deck that's going to require us to close the bridge for a period of time. We're estimating that between the time it takes to get ship the crane in, assemble the crane, bring the materials in for the cofferdam, and drive those sheets off the deck, so that they'll basically pick up the sheet pile and hang it over the deck and lower it to the river, and then pound it into the ground. That's how they'll do the red highlighted cofferdam there, and the portions of the blue that you see highlighted that are not underneath the deck, they can also do from the deck. So the idea is that they're going to put as much of the sheet pile in as they can from the deck, and only have to do the portions that are directly underneath the bridge from below, because that's a much harder install. There's an overhead clearance issues, and we can't get cranes down there to do this work. So we're doing as much as we can from above. So that will require us to close the bridge in the beginning to install it, and to take it back out again as far as the temporary stuff. So we're estimating that will be about a 2-week closure during those 2 different periods.
Is that 24 hours?
Yep, yes, 24 hours. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, that's the next slide. All right. So just some of the coordination we've done for the project. We go through our environmental coordinators at DOT, and we do our environmental reviews. So we do need permits for this project. We need both the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services permit, and we also need the Army Corps of Engineer permits, so we'll be getting those. Some of the other things that we look at in our evaluation of the project is the Atlantic salmon. This is essential habitat for that species, so we've determined that there's no adverse effect there. We look at the regulatory floodplain. There'll be no adverse effect towards that for any of our work. For water quality during our work, we have sedimentation concerns and erosion control concerns. So we'll do best management, what we call best management practices there. They're typical practices that we put in place that get approved by the Department of Environmental Services in our permitting. And then we oversee that and make sure that that gets done by the contractor during the implementation of the contract. It is considered navigable water, so we do have to coordinate with the U.S. Coast Guard, and we did that, and there's no permit needed for that, and they consider it no adverse effect for what we are doing there. Next slide, please. As far as protected species, I gotta remember what that acronym stands for. The Natural, thank you, Natural Heritage New Hampshire Bureau has no concerns, and that coordination has been completed. The New Hampshire Fish and Game coordination has been completed, and there's no concerns there. For U.S. Federal Wildlife and Fish and Wildlife Service, thank you very much. We have coordination for the northern long-eared bat, which is now becoming an endangered species. So we will have appropriate measures in our contract to take care of that. I practiced those acronyms before. As far as contaminated soils, we do have what the state calls limited reuse soils. we should have next to no impact on that because most of our stuff is working on the surface of the roadway on the side slopes and whatnot. And there have been no other sources of contaminated materials noted for the area, so there's really no concern for that. Next slide, please. For cultural resources, the bridge itself is not historic, not eligible, so there's no adverse effect for our work. However, there are some archaeologically sensitive areas within the vicinity of our work, and we have identified those through our review, and they'll be noted on our plans, and there'll be restrictions from the contractor to stay away from those areas in any of the work that they do. So there's no adverse effect anticipated there. All that said, if anybody here would like to become part of the 106 review process and wants to become what's known as a consulting party, that means that you can get invited to some of the meetings that we have and whatnot. And we ask that you have a vested interest in it, such as any abutters, town officials, etc. If you want to become a consulting party, you can contact Jamie Scour of Federal Highway, and you can get more information on how you can do that. Next slide, please. All right, so now we get into some of the other traffic control. So I mentioned that we're going to have to close the road for the 2 weeks at the beginning and the 2 weeks at the end. What happens during the 3 months or so that's going to take to do the work in between? We're going to do it with alternating one-way traffic. So the red square that you see on the screen there, again, let me show you the orientation. The main branch of the Pemmican on the right, the side branches on the left, New Hampshire 175 running left, right on the screen. So the red square kind of is the point on the road where we're going to go through the guardrail and begin our roadway down to the river. And the white space surrounding it, that's part of 175 that we're going to close off. And so you can see the yellow dividing line on the right there stops, and the yellow line on the left stops, and through that we'll barrier that off, and then we'll have signals that will allow traffic to alternate through. If you go to the next slide, please. And this is just looking at a little bit closer in. The top left is from, if you're approaching from the south, and you can see the orange little rectangles there are our Jersey barrier, concrete barriers that we'll put out. We'll have signals at either side, and they'll allow traffic to move back and forth. If you happen to be on a bicycle, you will travel through the work zone here as you would a car. So there will be signage there to let drivers know that bikes are allowed to be in the lane when they're traveling through the work zone. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we're going to have to close the bridge. That's going to require us to have some detours. So we were looking for this nice, easy, rounded detour here. You all know that had been posted 20 tons, then it was posted 3 tons, and then there's a project that's going to follow us that will do work to rehab that bridge. So that was not available to us. So next slide, please. We have basically detours between exit 30 and 31. So the left-hand side is the detour that if you were coming north on 175 and approaching the bridge from the south, not able to continue north across the bridge, the detour will direct you over South Station Road to Route 3 South to exit 30. You'll get on the highway going north to exit 31. You'll get off there, and then at that point you can continue north on 175 until you get to the next bridge if you're over 3 tons. But that takes care of the detour around our closure. If you were on the right-hand side, if you were traveling on 175 south, or if you were coming down 93 south and getting off at exit 31, intending to go 175 south, in both those cases, you'll be directed to go back onto 93 south, head down to exit 30, come back on 3 north to South Station Road, and then you can pick up 175 again. So that's essentially the detours, and it gives you the distances there, 4.5 miles or roughly 3.5 miles. And it roughly, when I did it on Google Earth and I mapped it, it talked about only about 4.5 minutes or so. So it shouldn't be a great imposition to do that. Next slide, please. So maybe the greater impact to the anybody wanting to cross the road is really for your emergency response. So the contract will issue what we call preemptive devices, and during the time when there's alternating one-way traffic through the zone and there's signals, those devices in your vehicles, ambulance and fire, We usually give out 2, but we can arrange for more if the town thinks that 2 is not enough. It allows those vehicles to get the green light. So when the system senses the signal, it changes the signals to green in that direction. So this work in my mind primarily affected your southerly fire station. Because your north fire station already has the restriction on the northern bridge, right? They can't go across that bridge. So if they needed to get across, I believe they have to go probably exit 32 to exit 31.
We'll probably cheapest way down.
Yeah, we come down Route 3 and come up.
Oh, you would come down all the way to our bridge and then go
We
north.
could go to 31, get on 32, come down to 31.
Right, then that's prime, so that's what I was thinking you would probably have to do anyway. If you needed to get to the north end of 175 up near that bridge, right? It made sense to me that you would go to 32 to 31 and then back north on 175. But during the closure time, those 2 week period in the beginning, 2 week period in the end, unfortunately, your southerly substation is gonna have to go down to 30 and go up to 31 or well, really, and then the northerly station has to go 32 to 31.
That's on that too, though, is you're posting that off, there's a fire hydrant across from the south station, and that's gonna be our water resource for anything on 175.
I got you. Oh, so anytime you need to retank, you have to.
Once they find a shot, connection like that, that's where we're gonna go get water.
Right.
Watch out for me, John.
There's no interstate bridge work in any of that.
No interstate bridge.
John, there is a hydrant at the sewer plant. Yeah, if we had to on that end, that might help you. A little tight getting trucks in and out of there.
Unfortunately, with the other bridge restricted, there's not a whole lot we can do. But for those, we try to minimize those closures as much as we can and do the alternating traffic.
Yeah, that's the only concern is when it's.
I understand. It's nice to think that it's a short period of time, but if anything happens during that short period of time, you're still in a lurch. Yep, we understand that. Unfortunately, it's
Make it work with 31.
great. Appreciate that. There's also, I'm not sure if you have an issue with the busing, right? If there's pickups or drop offs in that zone of 175.
When is this gonna happen?
Give me a minute, I'll talk about that schedule in just a second. And of course, bikes, when it's closed, will have to use Route 3. Next slide, please. Okay, there's no utility or right-of-way impacts and project schedule. So here we are. We're expected to advertise shortly. Currently, our advertising date is July 27th of this year, and our construction is supposed to be spring, summer, fall of next year. We actually have a restriction in the river that's actually shorter than that. So we have to we're trying to do it it's our own imposed restriction because we're trying to do it during the flow and all that stuff. So that brings us into the mid to late summer, early fall. That's the time frame that we're really going to be in the river. But the rest of the work to build the access road down and put the traffic control in and take the traffic control out and all that stuff. We basically will be there for the full summer season, which starts essentially in the beginning of April and runs through October.
So when are you anticipating that first 2 week closure?
Yeah, we expect that to be fair. The contractor can do minimal work before they have to put in the barriered traffic control. So the signalized traffic may go first. But at some point, when he's finished building his access road down and is really getting ready to project out into the river and do that work, he really needs to divert the water so that he can give himself a dry space. So at that point, I don't know, it's up to their means and methods to decide exactly when that 2 week period will be. But we will have a restriction in the contract that once he begins that 2 weeks, it's 2 weeks. He's got to be in and out and have the road back open when that 2 weeks is done.
And then when do that during low flow, I would imagine. Like you don't want the conditions that we just had.
Correct. Yeah, so he's gonna, it's gonna be a little bit dependent on what happens in that spring and whether the access is, amenable to his getting those sheets in. Because again, yeah, as soon as that sheet touches the water's gonna want to drag it somewhere and it's gonna, so as calm and as low flow as he can, understanding that he needs to get in there and get that diversion in there so he can do the rest of the work down below. And on the opposite end, we've given them 2 weeks to take it out. I don't necessarily, there won't be as much care. I don't mean to say that it's not important, but putting it in is a more difficult prospect than taking it out. So he can just pull them out and be done with it. So it may take a little less than 2 weeks to do it again, but we are giving them 2 weeks choice in the beginning of the end. Next slide, please. With that, there is a project website. That's the website address there, and you can get to this presentation. And the location map are the only two things that are on there right now, but if anybody wanted to look at this, you could go to the DOT's website and see it. And again, David Scott is project manager, and myself, Bill Safian, senior project engineer. If there's any questions, you can contact us at that number.
So is the sheet pile going to be visible above the water line?
It will, because we give them, oh, you mean the permanent copy then? Yes, it will be visible above the water line. Yeah. It's capped with concrete, so you won't see what's inside it, but yeah, and depending on the flow, I mean.
So thinking about like the kayakers that come down and people take pictures and all that, like, is it gonna be sheet pile or is it just sounds like it's encased in concrete?
No, the top 6 inches or so will be filled with concrete, but that's on the interior
Okay,
perimeter of it. Depending on, I mean, if the river is close to the top of the sheet pile, you might see the concrete, but for the most part, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it or not. I know in the Google Earth, I mean, there's lots of times when that first span is dry. The water kind of just, it really kicks downstream towards the abutment, but then it swings back and comes through the middle span. There's a lot of boulders and stuff in there, so the sheet pile will certainly be exposed on that side, and depending on how high the water is, it'll be exposed.
and any like habitat considerations around like a straight sheet pile thing, are you gonna do anything? Stones or anything like?
No, we originally there was what we call riprap around the pier, and obviously that didn't last. So one of the things we considered is it would have been a cheaper, perhaps fix for us to do that, but it wouldn't have been as permanent.
Yeah.
So in our reviews, we discounted the idea of using riprap in terms of this more permanent fix, and hopefully we'll never have to come back. We might have to eventually come back for the abutment because the river continues to move south.
Yeah.
But right now, hopefully with this work, we'll never have to come back for the pier.
Or like rock mattresses or anything like that?
It just doesn't, it really doesn't stay.
They really don't stay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
I mean, historically it hasn't stayed. I don't know if we've figured out a way to override Mother Nature. I mean, when it comes down, when it comes through with velocity, it comes through pretty good, and there's not a lot it moves very big rock. What we would think is a very big rock. Water can move it when it's going back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as the access road goes, when you guys fill that in, we have that access road, I guess you would call, that we've had gated off by the state. What's your plans after you've built that road and you've fixed the bridge and you've left?
It gets returned to its natural state.
Okay,
So there's requirements that they put a geotextile down first. There might be some tree clearing, so they're gonna have to basically bring the surface down to ground level. So if there's any trees or brush, they'll have to remove that, but they won't stump it. They'll just cut the trees down to ground. They'll put a geotextile layer down, and they'll put their fill material on top of that. So when they remove it, they essentially can get 100% of it back out. Theoretically, is that they'll remove that material and they take the geotextile out, and then it just grows back.
and then they replace the guardrail.
Yes.
Okay.
They'll close it back up.
Weekends when they're off-site, will they have some sort of gate or some sort of something across that access point, so folks,
Yeah, they're gonna.
people find access to the river no matter where it is.
I appreciate that point. We'll have to figure, maybe we'll have put in a requirement for them to just put at least the pieces of guardrail back.
Put
across
something across it.
to
in the
close that
summer
out.
months.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for that. That's a very good point.
Yep. Yeah. Is there any other questions from the public? Dave?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
And unless there's another question, I'm gonna take this to the municipal works and everything that
Oh.
forward to you.
This is on, yep, they have,
Okay,
I have it in there, but unless I put it on.
so there are some towns in the state that have laws on the books that say that if anyone is doing work on this town's streets, then the town needs to provide police presence. And New Hampshire DOT understands state statute to say that when DOT is doing work on a state road, we have authority to implement our own traffic control plans. There's a lot of times when we hire local police forces to assist. There are lots of times when flaggers provide adequate traffic control. So we ask every community that we deal with to sign a municipal works agreement saying that we're all on the same page, that the decision for how to handle traffic control is the decision of the state. I don't need you guys to sign this agreement tonight. I certainly encourage you to discuss it with your police chief. But wanted to discuss it here, give you opportunity to ask me questions, because I know it has been forwarded on to you and didn't know if you had questions regarding that. And if you wanted to sign it tonight, I'd be happy to take a copy, but
We understand that.
Yeah, I've
Right.
done these before,
okay.
but that's it.
I make a motion to accept the municipal work zone agreement. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
So I just,
Yeah, give a second. Or can we need a second, so it's just both original signatures, because
Oh, sure.
we'll sign it and send one
Yeah,
back.
we got one more, and then we'll
okay, what?
take them both back and send you one.
Oh, okay. So I don't need to go make a copy.
Nope.
Does anybody else have any questions for these gentlemen?
Where are you gonna put the closed sign for that road? By exit 31?
We're in the process of developing a traffic control plan. It's like, there should be some advance notice. I think it's currently gonna be coming south on 93, the actually 50 exit, what do you know? Because I'm trying to capture both the people on 175 and when direct them both back on the further south. We do have message boards in the contract, and they may be utilized for some advance notice.
I have just a quick question on the permanent coffer dam.
Yep.
Is that square to the river flow? Or
If you bring up
the
the,
bottom, you'll see they'll have a.
it's,
a
yeah,
like on-
it's more oriented, so like the river's very active, right, and it's moving south. So it's actually, let's see. Continue. Yeah,
This one?
no, go to the previous one, please.
This one?
That gives you a little bit broader picture. So
That's one.
there's a big if you look at the top right portion of that graphic, there's a little bit of a white space that comes down. That's meant to show that like the sandbar, there's a big sandbar that builds up there. So the traffic, the water is actually really sweeping really far south before it comes back north. So you can see there, if I were to say that the pier is oriented, 12 o'clock up to 6 o'clock, the water's kind of coming in at about a 5 o'clock direction, and it's just sweeping back, a little bit towards the north, but it's kind of southeasterly, if you will. So it's really oriented to be parallel to the sides of the pier cap that's there.
Okay.
But it's going to be driven into the ground enough that no matter which way the water's hitting it, it should. I mean, there'll probably be a little bit of scour around the outside, but that won't affect our foundation.
And I was just curious as to how that, what it does deflect around that,
Yeah.
what its effect is downriver.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that, but I guess I'll say it this way. The footprint that our cofferdam, our permanent cofferdam is going to take up is about the footprint that the original stone was when it went into as the pier protection at that point, the original pier protection. So the effect of what the water, it's maybe not a good answer for you, but it's basically in our minds bringing the river back to mimicking what it was doing originally.
Because when it did start to scour, there was a beach over on the left-hand side that, as it changed, wiped that beach out completely.
Yeah, right.
I was just wondering if that's gonna change it back, is that beach gonna come back, is it gonna be? Because that's an open invitation for people to come down off that hill.
When you the beach would be in that graphic in the upper left of the main branch, or
Yes, past the bridge on the left, just before it makes the turn. to continue south. So I'm. just thinking
Yeah.
ahead, that's all.
In a river like this, I'd say, every storm it can change. I mean, the river will move stuff and deposit stuff here. Tomorrow, next storm, it'll move it and be gone. In general, the water's moving, the river's moving south, we know that. But we're not looking to, I guess I can't really answer you well, what the downstream effect will be of the cofferdam. Other than to say, we're kind of, the footprint that we're impacting is back to essentially the original footprint that the rock did, that was there.
Okay, so I got a question, because I'm old and I'm clueless. So, to make it in simplistic lay terms.
Yes,
In 2024,
yes,
if I'm coming from shopping in the great old wonderful Plymouth, New Hampshire,
okay,
and I'm coming up the highway 93,
yes,
I'm gonna get off at exit 31 to go down my regular route of 175 to get to my little house lane that's at the Green Bridge. So I'm gonna get off at exit 31,
yes.
and it's gonna be a one lane.
No, because you're getting off north of the bridge.
Right.
So
North of the
when you
bridge.
get off at exit 31, you can
31.
continue north on
I
one
can
seventy-five.
continue north of 175 and go my merry way down to
Yes, you can.
Meadow Lane.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Fine, thank you for that. Okay. Like I said, it's,
No worries.
okay, thank you. And so
Just
then.
don't get
in
off at
20
exit 30.
Don't get off, don't get off exit 30.
No, I'm not get on at exit 30 anyway.
Unless Ruth is in a car.
Yeah, unless we're this thing on, right? Okay, so then in 2025,
We'll
Right.
be done.
you'll be done with that
This bridge.
detail,
This
this bridge,
Yeah.
right? And I'll still get off at
exit 31.
exit 31 and go my merry
But you
way.
could take this bridge to get up into town. If you wanted to.
Yeah, I only gonna be going to the mail once a week, cause I ain't going around, I did the mileage. And so, what was so I'm gonna be getting off and I'll go my merry way down 175.
Your destination is north of 31 and 175.
My destination is right at that flipping Green Bridge.
Okay. You shouldn't have to do anything different based on what we're doing for this project.
All right, you got that, Brenda? You want, cause she's right next to me. Okay, thank you. And thank you all for understanding.
But we're still screwed.
Until 2026.
But you're even bigger,
Yeah,
so
or
one
is
of those
it-
bridges come collapse and get driving across it.
Yeah.
Necessary evil, right?
Any other questions?
Well, she is 92.
All right, well, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to contact us. If the town has any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us and we'll do our best to answer your questions.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. So next up, we have guests here from the White Mountain National Forest Service. We have Roger Boyer and Scott Paul. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. And they are here tonight to speak to us about vegetation management opportunities in the Lost River area.
Now, the only state that they're supposed to find that we can have the recommendation. Talking about traveling, I think we're say that's a wonderful lesson.
I thought it was.
I've got more maps. I think you're looking.
I can share something else.
What else? What are you selling, sir?
Vegetation. We have an extra one up here if someone wants it.
We can share.
Anyone else like a map?
Thank you. Yes, I did need one. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'll make you a copy of one, and you can stop by the office tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Well, I'd like to thank the select board for the opportunity to meet with you all tonight.
Yes.
As you mentioned, my name is Roger Boyer. I'm the acting district ranger on the Pemigewasset Ranger District of the White Mountain National Forest. My office is in Campton. And I'm serving in a temporary position for 4 months. And Brooke Brown, who you may be familiar with, is the ranger. She's currently serving in Washington, D.C. for the next 4 months. So my colleague Scott Hall and I, Scott is our National Environmental Policy Act Coordinator, are here to give the select board a very brief overview of an upcoming project that we're calling the Lost River Integrated Resource Management Project. And we're in the very early stages of planning. So we just wanted to appraise the select board of where the project is and hopefully engage folks that are, let folks know how they can get involved in the planning process and get engaged in the project with us. So I'll give a quick overview of the project, where it is and what some of the objectives are. And then Scott will talk about our NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act process, timelines, and then specifics on how you can get engaged with the project. And so like all the projects on the White Mountain National Forest, the rationale for the projects is to implement what we call our land and resource management plan with the forest plan. That's our guiding document for all our actions on the national forest. So we essentially select an area, appraise the conditions on the ground, and look at those existing conditions and compare them to the objectives in the forest plan and see how they're different from the desired conditions that the forest plan outlined. And then we propose an action to get that piece of ground to meet the objectives that are in. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those objectives are. So this project area is on your map there. It's roughly the that central green area in the map. There is a little piece of the project area in Lincoln, but it's primarily right there in the center of the map in that large green area. And so some of the objectives that are in our forest plan include providing timber products, sustainably managed timber products. We're also looking to meet wildlife habitat objectives. So habitat for various different birds and mammals in particular. And that typically involves either commercial or pre-commercial harvesting activities to create different age classes. So young forest, mature forest. Oftentimes we try to, if there's areas that have certain tree species in them, like oak and pine, we try to promote those. Those are less common forest types in this area. So if our analysis indicates that we have some areas of oak and pine, we'll try to promote those areas. Aspen birch is another common forest type that we're trying to promote. We'll also be looking at the transportation system, so Forest Service roads that are within this area. Looking to see if they need to either be decommissioned or maintained or upgraded for either timber harvest access, wildlife management, or recreation purposes. So there's extensive snowmobile infrastructure in this area. There's access to the Elbow Pond recreation area, so we'll be analyzing all those spots as well for recreation access. Those are some of the general objectives that are in our forest plan that we'll be looking at this area. Again, we're in the very early preliminary stages right now of inventorying the area, looking at how it differs from the objectives in the forest plan. And so we're looking to engage the public, those that have a vested interest, know about the area, are interested in this area to help us develop a management plan for that location. And then Scott will talk more about what our analysis process looks like and how folks can get engaged. And then we can answer any questions that you might have or hear any feedback that you'd like to share.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, so Roger mentioned, my name is Scott Hall. I'm the National Environmental Policy Act Specialist, or with more commonly known as NEPA. So NEPA has two main objectives. The first is to take a good hard look at any environmental effects that may occur due to the actions we are proposing to take. And the second is to involve the public in those actions. The immediate abutters, as well as just the overall general public that are interested. To involve the public, we have a few milestones we take. So the timeline for the project typically is, now we're in early proposal developments. So as you see, your maps are clean, so we don't have a set proposed action yet. So that's kind of the purpose for getting here early. So we want to hear from you about what your ideas are. If you have any ideas for any actions that we may want to consider for the area, any concerns you may have, any knowledge you have of the area that we may not know about, we're looking to gather that now. And so after we do this, we're looking to do what's called scoping. So that's our initial formal public involvement process where we have an initial proposal, we send it out to the public, and we give 30 days for the public to give us feedback. So after we take that feedback, we'll take this summer and fall to do our effects analysis on our proposed actions. And then take it as a forest, take it in, analyze those effects. And then next year, around this time, we will put out a draft environmental assessment. And then the public will also have another opportunity to review that environmental assessment and give us more feedback. After that happens, we take that feedback and we finalize our environmental assessment and we put out what's called a draft decision notice. So the responsible official will make an initial decision on the project. And then once that occurs, the public will have a chance to do what's called objections. So if you object for any reason to the proposed action, you will have a chance to let us know. I don't agree, this is why. That I think you could have done this better, this better, this better, or I think you should do this instead of this, or I just oppose. All right, after that process, we take, as a region, we take those objections and the greater region, so the forest from Milwaukee to Maine, and of course Virginia, they gather a team and they review those objections and determine whether or not our assessment was adequate or whether or not it could be improved. All right, and after that process, the responsible official will make a final decision and the public will be informed and then implementation will occur. All right, so the timeline for that, we're looking to start scoping sometime next month, mid to late June. The draft environmental assessment will probably go out next May, so May of 24. And then objections are looking to be started in June next year. And then a final decision will probably be put out August or September of 24. And implementation is looking to start sometime in 2025. Okay, so that's about it for timeline and public involvement information. Does anyone have any questions?
Will this be in connection with the Elbow Pond project?
Yes, yeah, anything that has to do with the Elbow Pond camping area will be included in this.
I have strong opinions about Elbow Pond. I reached out to Brooke and maybe she made you aware.
We'll definitely be engaging with you and Officer Howell. I think yes, well, I can see that feedback and help craft it. At this point, we don't actually have a proposal, but that's the point of our being here is to engage folks and helping us craft a meaningful proposal that will be successful. Wonderful.
Is it gonna affect the snowmobile trails at all? You know now or?
It depends on the conditions of the trails and the conditions of the habitat around the trails. They may need to be moved, they may be fine. It just depends on how things look out there.
Part of our transportation analysis that I was referencing earlier, so we'll look at all the roads, hiking trails, snowmobile trails. And we're looking for things like sedimentation or steep slopes or anything like that, help stabilize the trails or doing an analysis. We have a lot of roads across the national forest. I don't know about this project area in particular that are no longer used or they need to be upgraded. So we'll make decisions like that. So I'm unaware of any specific snowmobile proposals in that area. I think that Warren to Woodstock trail runs through there.
Yeah.
We made a significant investment in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will you be in contact with the clubs in different
absolutely.
areas? That will be part of the communication process.
So Scotty will be sending a letter to all the abutters in the area, snowmobile clubs, typically involved New Hampshire Fish and Game. We have a list of folks on the forest that like to be involved in all the projects, whether or not they're adjacent to where they live or not. But our main focus typically is on folks that have a vested interest in the project area, are users of the project area, and know, like, for example, your familiarity with the Elbow Pond area, your familiarity with the snowmobile infrastructure. That's the type of feedback that it's difficult for us to assume what's best for the ground, right? You guys know, because you're there using it. There's someone left some cash on the table. So the tips. But yes, that's really the main point of the public involvement process is to engage people in helping us craft.
So your focus of this is primarily 112 and 118.
Yeah, there is a spot north of the Woodstock Lincoln line that we're looking at. It's a little green section to the north there. But again, we're still just in early recon phases of that.
Yeah, due to the vastness of that big green central spot, I'm going to be sending a letter to virtually everyone who lives west, or yes, west of Highway 3. Because this eventually will be affected in some way by trucks going in and out, something like that.
Great. Do you have any other questions?
So basically, your tentative plan is to forest area.
Forest.
Log off, or logging, or I mean. You
Right.
said trucks and stuff, I'm assuming that you're in.
Right. So, as I was taking through that list of forest plan objectives, oftentimes it includes, diversifying, meaning, timber harvesting for wildlife purposes and for timber products. So that would definitely be part of what we'll be analyzing, whether or not that's the decision.
Who knows?
So it's basically a patch type.
Could be patches,
Or like
could
the-
be single tree selection, could be shelter wood. There's various different.
But you're not talking mass clear cut.
Well, so our forest plan allows for clear cutting in certain forest types, but no larger than 30 acres. So we're limited by our forest plan. So in addition to the objectives that are in our forest plan, there's also what are called standards and guides. Basically says, if you're going to take an action, they have to be consistent. Your action has to be consistent with the standards and guides in the forest plan. And one of those standards and guides relates to timber harvesting is no clear cut shall exceed 30 acres.
The scenic byway, like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to clear cut 30 acres on the scenic byway.
Right. And that's an important point. We have part of our, as Scotty was mentioning, the National Environmental Policy Act process that we go through. There's a team of what we call resource specialists. So we'll have a fisheries biologist, a landscape architect. So speaking to the visuals, that would be someone that does an analysis from certain scenic viewpoints. To say, well, if we do any timber harvesting, what will it look like from, we'll come up with a list and we'll share with the public of like, here's where we think the scenic hot spots are. Members of the public might have other places as well. I recreate here, or there's a lot of users that come to this spot. What's it going to look like from there? The landscape architect would do some modeling, create some graphs, create some photos that shows like, okay, here's what that's going to look
Can
like.
you come back to a meeting like this, sorry, to present those models? Like, so we would.
Typically, that's in the analysis document that Scotty helps coordinate, so it's pretty detailed, they're pretty robust documents that have a lot of,
Just a synopsis, something.
Yeah. you know, it puts it in pretty plain speak, you know, and you know, where it shows, here's what it looks like before, during, after. And so some other specialists involved, like a wildlife biologist, engineer, recreation specialist, forester, hydrologist, soil scientist, archaeologist. So it's a pretty extensive review process that takes place. By design, we're required to go through that process.
When was the last time that anything was done up there?
I think the last entry was along Walker Brook Road. I'll say it was 99. So Walker Brook Road is off of 118. So if you're heading up slope on 118, it's off to your right.
Would you be looking on points further north, like, upper 112, where like the Dilly Foot fire occurred with there's probably some cleanup of vegetation. Maybe some reforesting of sorts.
That would be one.
Is that, I mean, you can see it as you drive by, you can see that the landscape is very different than what it was.
Yeah,
prior
yeah.
to that.
I
A lot of land wasn't on national forest though, so.
Right, so there you get you got some land ownership issues there of state land
All the way
versus federal land.
The top.
I'm not super familiar with that spot, but I've seen of it, it's I can't imagine proposing
dense,
timber
yeah.
harvesting on it, because I mean, it's windy and steep. So I don't want to rule it out, but I'm not exactly sure where the Forest Service boundary is there, and then I think we would be limited by the topography there.
But halfway up a society.
Yeah.
In terms of where it's
It's a great question though.
Do we have any other questions? Thoughts?
What's this more about Devil Pond campground thing? Is that coming down the road here? We'll find out more or?
We don't have any strict proposals yet. Some ideas, our recreation specialist is thinking about looking at, you know, there's dispersed camping there. There's some erosion due to that camping, so looking at hardening some of the sites, adding more campsites to that location. So what does that, you know, what does that look like? Where do you put them? Those are all the things we're listening.
And those are things that you would listen to input from.
Yeah.
Community members and.
Would that be termed like a pay, like AAA, you know, pay ticket to get in camp kind of thing? Is that what they're thinking?
So we don't have a proposal yet. But so typically how these proposals work is like, you know, we'll engage the public and say, what would you like to see happen here? We talk to our specialists, what are some options? And then typically the decision maker is going to want to analyze a number of alternatives. So one is always, well, what happens if we just leave it as it's status quo and do nothing? We call it the no action alternative. And we'll say, all right, well, is that no action alternative consistent with the objectives in the forest plan? And then maybe the other end of the spectrum is, oh, we want, you know, I'm speaking hypothetically here, so I'm sure this wouldn't happen. I don't think the economics would work out, but you know, oh, we're gonna pave it and we're gonna put, you know, all kinds of trailheads in there, and you know, there's gonna be RV camping or whatever. You know, that would be a different alternative to consider. Typically, what happens is it's more somewhere in the middle of, oh, well, we're gonna, you know, maybe put some tent platforms in or something like that, or bring in compacted gravel to certain locations. And, I'm not super familiar with how that area is used recreationally. My background is more on the timber harvesting side of the house, but
But we'll definitely have ability to give input.
absolutely,
from the
that's
public.
Not just the
The
ability, that's what we're seeking, like, that's the point of our visit, is to engage the
Because that's a
public.
very important area.
Yeah.
To the local, I think, to locals, and we will all want input on that.
Sure, the police chief would love about 50 sites up there.
That's not all my concern. So my concern, sir, is the shooting range at Elbow Pond is designed in such a way that it brings people there and they leave trash and debris. The project that I had heard from law enforcement at LEO is that range is going to be moved to the back section where we currently have an MOU with your office. And then people who will bring all this material will do so in somewhat of a way that can't be monitored or policed. And I think that trash and debris out in the forest is difficult to stop. Now, if we shut down the Elbow Pond shooting range, people will continue to shoot there in different directions. You have multiple people and erecting different locations, whether it's across the street or down the road, they'll be shooting into the forest. At this moment, my officers can go on, drive through, and people, they recognize that there are police out here and we need to behave. They're still bringing their trash there, but we have a section of the population that comes up and cleans that regularly, whether they're picking up the brass for profit or just picking up the trash because they care about the area. That is going to happen less if we hide it out in the woods.
I think that's the exact type of feedback and, you know, alternatives that the Forest Service needs to hear, right?
And
Before we.
not to mention that various activities can continue when you're deep in the woods and can't be seen. Whereas when it's right in the wide open, people think twice about doing things they shouldn't.
Well, we definitely look forward to engaging with you more on that topic. Coming up.
I have ideas.
So if we have individuals who are interested in working with you folks, who's the best contact? Should we contact Scott? I think it's Scott, okay.
Actually, I'll give you, Eric and Judy, my card, so she has my email. She can send us the
Okay.
public.
And then we're also planning to have a public engagement meeting, which hopefully some of you all will be interested in joining. I believe it's September 20th, sorry, May 25th, just a few weeks from today, May 25th at the Lakeland Town Hall. 5 to 7 p.m.
6 to 7:30.
6 to 7:30 p.m. And then we'll be just laying out, hopefully we'll have a little more of a map with, you know, some of the roads and some of the areas that we're looking at, a little more detail. That meeting to engage the public. We'll have a forester, a wildlife biologist, myself, Scott, and we'll be there to kind of start soliciting feedback and input. You don't have to be at that meeting to provide input. There's multiple ways to provide input, but oftentimes that's a good way to interact with, you know, for instance, the wildlife biologist, if you have species concern, for the recreation specialist, if the treating rate is concerned that you have. Again, it doesn't have to be at that meeting. We'll accept comments in writing, or I'm planning to get with you and Officer Howard to sit down to hear some of the concerns. I probably will not be the deciding official on this one. Again, I'm here for 4 months. As far as I understand, Brooke will be coming back, but I have been delegated to, you know, initiate this process and get it rolling. So that's my role here now. But this is pretty typical of most Forest Service projects where we have a pretty defined process. So, you know, any ranger can come in and we'll be following a very similar process.
Just going back to what you mentioned about the firing range. How do you mix that with the wildlife management? I live probably 2 miles as the crow flies, and if we're out walking the dog, she leads us because of the topography, the sound carries that far. And it just, that's a battle, if the sound carries that far. The wildlife radius around that has to be.
It's, you know, it's a complicated topic and there's always trade-offs with natural resource management and recreation uses and. You know, extracting timber resources and those kind of things. Those are all that's part of that analysis that happens. Say, okay, well, I think our wildlife biologist would be better able to answer what the impacts, but I don't know what the impacts are, to be honest with you. You know, and then there's other recreational impacts as well, proximity. You know, if there's additional campsites out there, you know, we have to make sure, right, the Forest Service can't invite a member of the public to actively camp at a developed location, knowing there's an active shooting range right next to it, right? So you have to balance those two uses, right? There are some uses that are not necessarily compatible on the exact same acre. So that's part of the decision-making process.
Anything else? Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it. And
Well, thank you for your time and for the great questions and for listening. We really appreciate it and look forward to your continued engagement with our meeting again. It's May 25th over at the Lincoln Town Hall and Scotty's information the select board has. So we hope, and many of you are probably going to be receiving an abutter letter talking more about this process, and we hope you engage with us.
Within the next week, and I'll be sending that letter to the town hall as well.
Thank you.
thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night. Moving along here, we have up next to approve and sign the minutes from the April 18th meeting.
We'll make a motion to accept them as presented.
I will second. All those in favor? Aye. Did you bring a copy of the signs? Thanks. All right, up next, we have a letter of request here from Alpine Adventures. Directed to the Woodstock Select Board and the Public Works Director. Based on some heavy rains earlier this winter, there was some drainage and road damage to the upper portion of Avery Farm Road. They are seeking permission to allow their maintenance crew to fix the said washout and damage. I'm under based on the letter that they've spoken with Mike, and know what is necessary to repair that portion of the road. And they're looking to hopefully start this process in the coming week.
Because it's a class 6, they need.
It
to
is right,
request it in
because it's a
writing.
class 6. That is the reason why they're writing to the select board.
They have to ask permission.
They have to ask permission to do the repairs.
And I believe has Jeff met with you or talked with you, and this has been what, yes.
Yep.
So we asked him to put it in writing.
They're gonna
as well.
repair the edge, it is passable. Part of the road is washed out, so they're gonna repair the rest of the road, they're gonna clean up the ditches and open up the culverts.
So it's bad for everything and doing the work.
That's class 6, they come out.
Beneficial to the town, let them do it.
So just a motion, if you guys are okay with it, and we'll get them.
I'll make a motion to allow Alpine Adventures to repair the damage done to Avery Farm Road.
I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We've just received, we've got Cheryl supply us with updated list of properties for DO.
This is just an update, her bi-weekly, she'll be here on the 16th to give you a final, but you'll see from the 2nd to today, 2 have already come off.
Great.
And there's some arrangements with a couple others, but this was just to keep you in the loop as to where she is.
Appreciate that. All right, so then moving on, we have some donations and check requests for the Woodstock Fire Fund. So first up, we have I'll make a motion to accept the $500 donation from the Penny Valley Church to the Woodstock Fire Department. Do I have a second?
Yes, you do.
All right, all those in favor? Next up is a donation, so I make a motion to accept the donation of $1,420 for t-shirt sales to the Woodstock Fire Department Fund. I know, it's great. Do I have a
I'll
second?
make it, I'll second that, yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
And then next, we need to approve some check requests. So we have a check request payable to Neptune Uniforms and Equipment for $8,938.90. I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
All those in favor? Aye. And we have another one, so I make a motion to accept, or to process, payment to Neptune Uniforms for, $1,558.45.
I'll second that one.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And another check request, motion to, put a check for $165 for Neptune Uniforms. Do I have a second?
Yes, you do.
All those in favor? Aye. And last, a check request for reimbursement, for Easter egg hunt supplies and, flowers and cards for funeral service in the amount of $570.72.
I'll make the motion to accept that.
Oh, second, all those in favor? Aye. All right. Next, we have, the issue with 18 Sargent Street and the trail down on town property, down accessing the river out behind here.
So at the end of last year, we received in the fall complaints from Sergeant Street, and then this spring we've received 3. So I asked Mike to go out and walk from behind to see what was going on, and 18 Sergeant Street is an Airbnb that they've cleared a trail from to come onto the back of our property. Well, Mike's walked it, he's got pictures. Comes onto our property and heads them down to the river. And I don't know if you want to chime in, but once you get down to because we did the river stabilization project here a few years ago.
Yep.
It also detours them onto 2 different property owners. But our main concern is that they bring them down our property and not so much they're using our property, but where they're leading to is like a 30-foot drop. It's leading them to a very dangerous area on our property.
It's all big ledge stone. It's not like there's a path to the river.
Okay,
And the river is its strongest against that. That's why they rebuilt it.
gotcha.
And a lot of people are using that trail to go over for the neighbors and use there. They have a nice little campfire and stuff that they had set up out there. And they've gone up and found people out there, or they've been out there and people walked up thinking they have use of it. And they don't.
And then if they set that up.
No access down to the safe access down to the river. On the town itself property. I'm just worried that some kid or somebody's gonna fall down on that rock pile and get
To
hurt.
say nothing of the inconvenience to the people that they're going on and using their private property.
It's like, you know, if they
Made an issue for a while.
they post their properties and that we're using solely on ours, but ours is not safe. So when I was speaking to Laura, and Mike spoke to Laura today, about posting it.
Yep.
Well, you see, this is her email, what she sent to him. So we can't do that without the vote from the board. And
Okay.
typically we don't do that with town property, but it is very unsafe out there.
Where would it be posted? right where it comes, right where the
Well,
property line between the Airbnb
yes.
and the town is, so they don't get to walk all the way down and find out that they're in the wrong place.
Right, we've stopped them before they got there because that ultimately is,
We have to send the homeowner of the Airbnb a letter
yes.
to cease
You see the,
sending them out there.
which Laura will do.
Yeah.
And plus, they're piling their materials out there from their yard, all their yard stuff. It's, so we'll send them a letter about that and address that, but then
Okay.
that it's not a dumping area either, but also that we need a motion pretty much, or we need your permission to do that.
So I'll make the motion to give the public works director permission to post a no trespassing sign on that property. And to also for the town's attorney to send the current owners of that property a letter stating the same.
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Good, thank you for walking that too and checking it out.
That's been going on a while. You've never able to address it now.
Mhm.
So now we'll open the floor to public participation for any of the items on this evening's agenda. Any questions or concerns?
The only thing I wanted to say
Yes.
is, due to my job, I'm really familiar with the legal process.
Yes.
So more than happy to help shepherd this.
For service. The loss for litigation, great, thank you. We appreciate that. It's always good to have eyes and ears on projects like that. Great, anything else? Good. Thank you all for being here this evening. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 6:11 p.m.
I'll make that.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.